Speak Your Truth, Poetry Podcast, Episode 1, The Healing Power of Poetry. Welcome to Speak Your Truth, Poetry Podcast, and welcome to our first episode. This one's titled The Healing Power of Poetry, and I am so grateful that everybody's here with us today. Whether you're listening on a morning walk, in the quiet evening, just chilling, smoking, or in the middle of a restless night. I have those a lot, quite often. But hey, the space is for everybody. So whatever you're doing, if you want to put it on, go for it. Today we're actually going to be exploring how poetry can become a quiet companion. A place where hurt, hope, and healing can all share the same breath. Poetry has been a lifeline for human beings long before we had books or podcasts. When we didn't have written language, we spoke in rhythm and chant. The steady beat of words became our memory and our medicine. A poem at its heart is a small container for big feelings. When life feels overwhelming, when anxiety hums or depression weighs heavy, poetry offers a few clear lines where we can set those feelings down. It doesn't demand that we fix everything. It simply listens. And sometimes, just being heard by the page, by the air, by your own voice, begins the work of healing. Because poetry gives shape to what otherwise stays tangled inside. Emotions don't always arrive with clean labels. They come as pressure, restlessness, numbness, grief without a name. A poem slows that chaos down, so to speak. It turns sensation into language. And once something has language, it becomes less frightening. It becomes something we can sit with instead of run from. Poetry also works at the pace of the nervous system. Think about it. The rhythm of a line, the pause at the end of a stanza, the breath between the words. All of it invites the body to settle down. You may not notice it at first, but your shoulders drop, your breathing starts to even out, and then the poem just becomes a quiet place where your system can rest. And unlike advice or self-help, poetry doesn't argue with your pain. It doesn't tell you to look on the bright side. It doesn't rush you toward a solution. It says, this is allowed. You are allowed. Writing or listening to poetry also creates distance without disconnection. You're not drowning in the feeling anymore. You're holding it at arm's length, examining it, honoring it. That small shift is powerful. It turns suffering into witnessing. And witnessing is where healing begins. Most importantly, poetry reminds us we're not alone in what we feel. Across centuries, across cultures, Someone else has sat with grief, fear, love, loss, hope, and left behind words that still breathe. When you read or speak a poem and think, yes, yeah, that's it, something inside you loosens. Sorry about that. Connection happens. Poetry doesn't heal by erasing pain. It heals by making room for it, by giving it a voice, by letting it move instead of harden. And in that movement, line by line, breath by breath, that's when we begin to rise. The next topic we're going to go over is poetry as permission. One reason poetry heals is that it gives permission. Permission to name sadness without apology, permission to admit that you're not okay, and to do so beautifully. So much of life teaches us to minimize what we feel. Be grateful, be strong, don't dwell, move on. I mean, even I'm guilty of that. I say that stuff to my wife all the time. I don't mean it like that though. But poetry moves in the opposite direction. It says stay. Stay with the feeling long enough to hear what it's actually saying. Do something for me and think of a time you couldn't quite explain what you were feeling. Not sadness exactly, not anger exactly, just a tightness, a heaviness, a sense that something was off. And then you stumbled on a poem, maybe in a book, online, and suddenly someone else have found the words you couldn't. That moment matters a lot more than we realize, because recognition is relief. It's the quiet shock of thinking, that's it. That's what I've been carrying. And with that recognition comes permission. Permission to stop pretending you're fine. Permission to feel without needing to justify it. Permission to let complexity exist without forcing it into neat explanations. Poetry also gives permission to be honest without being exposed. You can speak the truth sideways, through a metaphor, through image, through rhythm. You don't have to say everything directly for it to be real. This is especially powerful for people who've learned to survive by staying silent. Poetry becomes a doorway, a way to tell the truth without shouting it, a way to say, this happened to me. This is how it feels, without asking for permission from anyone else first. And when you realize someone else has stood where you stand, someone else has felt this depth, this confusion, this ache, something loosens. That's the isolation cracking. You may still be hurting, but now you know you're not strange for it. You're not weird. You're not weak. You're human. Poetry doesn't ask you to perform healing. It doesn't require progress updates or silver linings. It simply opens the door and says, hey, you're allowed to be here. And sometimes that permission to feel, to name, to exist as you are is the most healing thing of all. Our next topic is poetry as presence. Poetry also slows us down. A good poem asks you to pause, to breathe between lines, to notice the quiet spaces as much as the words themselves. In an age of constant scrolling, that pause is radical. It's a small rebellion against the noise, against the pressure to consume, react, explain, move on. A poem doesn't reward speed. It resists skimming. It asks for your full attention. Not for long, just for real. When you sit with a poem, your body notices first. Your breath changes, your shoulders soften. The mind stops racing ahead and settles into the moment that's actually here. Presence is where healing lives, not in fixing the past, not in worrying the future, but in this breath, in this line, this quiet moment where nothing is being asked of you. Poetry gives us a place to practice that kind of presence, to stay instead of escape, to listen instead of distract, to feel without numbing or rushing ourselves through it. And when you stay, something honest shows up. You meet yourself. Not the version you perform for the world, but the one who's tired, the one who's grieving, the one who's still hoping, even when it's hard to admit. You may also discover strength there. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that has kept you breathing, kept you standing, kept you returning even when you wanted to disappear. Poetry doesn't demand that you change in that moment. It doesn't push transformation. It simply holds space long enough for truth to surface. And in that honest meeting with your grief, your hope, your hidden resilience, healing starts. Not as a dramatic breakdown, but as presence, as being fully here, as choosing to witness your own life, one line at a time. At this point in the podcast, I want to offer you something different. Not an explanation, not a lesson, just a place to rest. This is actually a poem I wrote specifically for this podcast. And for anyone carrying heaviness today, for anyone who hasn't had a moment to breathe without being asked to perform, explain, or endure, you don't need to analyze it. You don't have to understand every line. Just listen. Let it arrive the way breath does, naturally, quietly, and on its own time. This one's called A Quiet Room in the Heart. There's a room inside you where the noise cannot enter. Its door has no lock, only the hush of your own breath. Sit there. Let the dust of the world settle until the light finds your skin. Grief will come, but here it has no teeth. Fear will knock, but here it has no key. In this quiet room, the walls are made of poems. Each line a gentle hand reminding you, you're still here. You're still whole. Stay as long as you need. When you leave, carry the silence with you like a lantern. If that poem stirred something inside you, you don't need to name it right now. You don't need to fix it or turn it into insight. Let it stay unfinished. Let it breathe. That quiet room isn't something you have to earn. It isn't a reward for healing. It already exists. You can return to it anytime with a poem, with a breath, with a moment of honesty when the world feels too loud. And if all you do today is remember that the room is there, that's enough. If that poem brought even a small sense of calm, consider writing your own. Not a masterpiece, not something meant to be shared or judged, just a few honest lines that belong to you. Doesn't have to rhyme, doesn't have to follow rules, doesn't have to explain anything. Try writing 3 lines that capture a moment of peace. A candle's flicker in a dark room. A pet's slow, steady breathing. The quiet rhythm of your own heartbeat reminding you that you're still here. These details matter more than they seem. They anchor you to the present. They train your attention toward what is gentle instead of what is urgent. Over time, these small poems become tiny rooms of their own. Places you can step into when the world feels too loud. Places that don't demand strength, only presence. You might write one and never return to it. Or you might collect them, slowly, until you realize you've built a refuge out of language. There's no right way to do this, no timeline, no expectation of healing on schedule. Just a simple act of noticing, of naming what brings you even a moment of peace. Of reminding yourself that calm still exists, even on difficult days. And if today all you do is listen, if writing feels like too much right now, that's okay too. Invitation is here. The room is still here. Whenever you're ready, poetry will be waiting. Thank you. for spending this time with me on Speak Your Truth, a poetry podcast. Thank you for slowing down, for listening, for choosing presence in a world that rarely encourages it. I hope today reminded you that poetry is more than art. It's a companion for the hardest days. A place to set your thoughts down when carrying them alone feels too heavy. A gentle light when the path feels dark and uncertain. You don't have to wait for the right words or the right moment. Poetry meets you exactly where you are. Tired, hopeful, unsure, still standing. It asks nothing more than your attention and your honesty. If you feel called, share a poem with a friend, or write a few lines just for yourself, or simply whisper one to yourself tonight and let it be enough. Let this be a reminder that your voice matters, even when it trembles, that your story has weight, even in its quiet moments, and that healing doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives softly, like breath. Until next time, stay grounded, stay grateful, and always, always speak your truth. Peace out.